Good afternoon. So this video, I'm going to try to keep it to one. It might actually be split into two. It's all about interviewing. So we're going to talk about what an interview is and the purpose, the basics for question and answer, and then some tips and tricks for you. Okay. So as a standard, most people think a job interview is when you meet with an employer to get a job. And that's only 50% accurate. The other piece of that is that you're also there to interview the employer. So like this definition says, it's highlighted, it's a chance for both parties, you and the employer, to learn more about each other. Just as much as the employer is assessing if you're the right fit, you need to be assessing if that employer and that job are the right fit for you and your skills. So it really is a two-way street. And a lot of people don't think about that because they just want to get a job right away. But you want to find the right fit and best situation to help your skills and your strengths shine. Okay. Definitely, I included here a chance to learn if you meet the qualifications for the role. Okay. No one's going to meet them 100%, but how many do you meet and how well? So again, it's an opportunity for both parties. And I think that's most important to keep in mind. You don't want to give answers that are untrue. Obviously, you want to be polished. You want to practice. You want to give good responses that are also true to who you are, to make sure you're being clear with the employer about whether or not you're the right fit. Okay, so standard do's and don'ts people ask about. You need to have appropriate dress and grooming. And so for most interviews, this is going to be business attire, suits. If it's a little more casual and they've told you that, maybe you could do without the suit jacket, but I always say you should step it up a little bit, be a little bit more formal than you think you might have to be for the workplace. So suits are really the way to go. If you don't have a full suit, you can piece things together with maybe a pair of khakis or dark slacks and then a suit jacket. Ladies, you can always do a skirt. I've seen some do a dress with a suit jacket. If you don't have a suit jacket, a really nice cardigan. And to this point, if you don't have the funds for these things, there is on campus a closet where you can go and get really, really nice articles of clothing for interviews. But you need to be appropriately dressed and groomed. So I shouldn't have to say this, but I see this all the time. Make sure you have showered, that your hair is tidy. You don't want to be smelling bad. You don't want your makeup to be too garish, too over the top. This is a neutral setting. I know some work environments are a little more open, but for your interview, we want to keep it traditional. Okay, so if your hair, like mine, has a tendency to kind of get everywhere, maybe you need to tie it back. Everything just a little, like I said, a more tidy and professional than it might need to be on a daily basis. You need to know where you're going to interview and how to get there. So sometimes the day before or the weekend before an interview, hopping in your car and figuring out the best route. How long does it take? Looking into traffic. Where are you going to park? All of these things you need to know ahead of time. And then you want to arrive 10 minutes early. Don't arrive 30 minutes early and then just sit in that lobby because you're probably going to bump into someone else they're interviewing. The team isn't going to be ready for you. You're just going to be staring at someone. If you get to your interview site more than 10 minutes early, hang out in your car and then go in at 10 minutes early. On that point, don't be late either, okay? Be polite to everyone you encounter. We've all heard the stories that there's employers out there who go back and ask folks, how did so-and-so treat you when they were here, down to the janitor at times. I know in my old job, we used to always go back and give our feedback, even if we weren't part of the committee, based on how the candidate treated us. What did they do while they were waiting, etc. So if you know someone who works at the site you're going to, don't go back to their office and hang out with them. Be professional, sit up front, and be polite and courteous to everyone. You want to give a good handshake because we don't want the dead fish, that limp handshake, but you don't want it so strong you're trying to win a contest. So practice your handshakes if you feel like you're not up to par. Always want to be positive in an interview, okay? You don't want to talk about how miserable it is outside, how your last job was such a bummer, how you can't stand a certain this or that. Everything needs to be positive and upbeat. You want to, when you're interviewing, maintain eye contact and mirror body language. Doesn't mean stare someone down, but typically you'll be interviewing with either one person or a small group. So you can take turns kind of making eye contact. And then if they're sitting with their hands on the desk, I would encourage you to do the same. There's that subtle mirroring that kind of psychologically makes an employer think you all are on the same page when you're mirroring their behaviors. Now, that's certainly a level up on the interview tips. So focus on getting your responses up to par first, and then you could think about mirroring. Anytime you're answering a question, and we'll touch on this more in a bit, you need to respond with evidence, okay? So if they ask about your strengths and you say that you are a really organized person, you can't leave it at that. How do you prove that you're organized? Did you revamp the filing system at your company and now people can work 3 times faster? Or locate files with more ease than in the past, okay? You've got to give specific examples. Back yourself up. And if you don't know or understand a question, ask them to rephrase it, because that gives you, or to repeat it, it gives you a chance to kind of think and ponder about what they mean. You want to be concise, yet also answer the whole question. Definitely aren't going to answer with one to 3 words. Take the time you need to answer the question, answer it thoroughly, and then stop. Don't ramble, don't go on and on. And that's where practice with an interview will really help you next week when we have this for a grade, and then in the future at real interviews as well. Practicing is going to make you such a strong interviewer. When you are nervous and you haven't practiced, it shows by either answering with just a few words or rambling. There's always a sign of that. Okay, you want to be yourself and be honest. Absolutely do not lie. Just like we don't lie on a resume or cover letter. Don't make up a story when you're trying to give evidence, right? When responding to a question. Be honest and be yourself. If you're a person who interjects a little humor, then do that. If this is a team who likes that, that could benefit you. If it's a team who's super uptight, you're not going to fit in there anyway, and you're going to be miserable. So you may decide you don't want that job. So be yourself while leveling up the professionalism just a little bit, okay? And then you need to bring questions to the interview, okay? And they shouldn't be questions about vacation and pay, which we'll touch on the next slide. Things about company culture, what's your favorite part of your job, what are your top 2 goals for me in the first 6 months, etc. There's going to be a point in the interview where you're asked if you have questions, and if you say no, they're probably going to pass on you, okay? And then we flip to, if we can get there, to the don'ts. Don't dress flashy or inappropriately. So your jewelry shouldn't be the chunky necklaces we love. It shouldn't be over the top sequins. For men, if you're wearing a tie, a little more subdued, maybe not your Easter Sunday tie. Hairstyles should be, again, toned down. That doesn't mean if you wear your hair curly, you can't, but let's see what we can do to make it a little neater than it might be on a summer day. If you have longer hair, you might need to pull it back. Be authentic in your hair, but just, like I've said 100 times, level it up a little, okay? If you have tattoos, think about where you're interviewing. Do you need to cover those or not? Some work environments, and increasingly so, it's not a problem, but a few it is. So that's where company research would help. I know for myself, I'm in a more conservative field in higher ed. So some clients that come in, I do wear a long sleeve shirt because of a tattoo or some bracelets. So, and then others, I don't worry about it at all. So it really comes down to the environment, but think about what inappropriate would be for the environment you're applying to work in. Don't make negative comments about previous employers. You're probably going to be asked, tell us about a difficult boss or a difficult situation. And that's where you got to tread lightly. You don't want to trash someone because the employer is testing you with that question to find out if you'll talk badly about them. You could just say the fit wasn't right or you had different visions, but you don't want to get negative on them. You also, as I mentioned, don't falsify your application materials or answers to questions. You never want to ask about salary, leave, or vacation unless it's brought up to you. And I have some pro tips on that we'll get to, it looks like in a second video or down the line. But asking them how much you're going to get paid or when you can take vacation isn't appropriate. If you have a vacation planned, once you receive your offer, you can work that out with them. Don't act like you'll take any old job. The employer wants to feel special. Okay, so when they ask you why you want this job, don't do what I've had one interviewee say, which is, I'm just tired of working part-time jobs and want something full-time. Because that was the first question, and I checked out after that. That's not why I want someone in my office. Don't be unprepared. You can make notes on your resume. You can make notes in your notepad or your Padfolio you take with you, and you can glance down at those. It's totally normal and almost expected, okay? Because this is a nerve-wracking situation. So being prepared with some notes isn't going to hurt you, and they're not going to look down on that. You don't need to go to extremes with your posture. Just don't slouch and don't sit rigidly into your chair. So try to just be yourself, make sure your shoulders are up and back. But other than that, you don't need to get wild with things. You definitely, these last two I shouldn't have to say, but I've seen them happen. Don't chew gum. So spit your gum out, spit your mint out, whatever. And don't smoke or vape. Yes, I have seen vaping in an interview. And if you're offered a drink, don't slurp it. Okay, maybe take your sips in between where the interviewers are speaking. I'm going to run through this and then we're going to pause before we get to the top 10 questions, and I'll start a second video. Basically what happens in an interview once things are set up, there's your arrival, interview, closing, and follow-up. And these pieces are all important. We know we're going to arrive slightly early, 10 minutes early, no more, okay? And you're going to meet people, you're going to shake their hands, repeat their name when provided, make them feel special, be polite. The actual interview, which is the part you'll worry about the most, of course, and we're going to touch on, is you're going to have question and answer either one-on-one or in a group, typically. Okay, and sometimes there's several stages. So sometimes you have a one-on-one, and then you have a group, and then you go to a lunch or something like that. It depends on the company and how high up you're interviewing. So that's very, it's hard to say what is normal. Okay, in closing, you're going to ask your questions. That's where you get your information and you're taking notes on what they're telling you. So you look very engaged, and you should be engaged, but if you're not, you at least want to look it. And then I have here something called a closer. Okay, a closer is very important. When the interview wraps up and you're shaking hands, or before you start shaking hands even, you need to tell the group how much you love this job and want this job and why you're the best fit. So you just reiterate and say something like, of course, we'll polish it because this is off the top of my head, but I just want to thank you for letting me come talk with you today. This interview has definitely solidified the fact that this job is my top choice. I want to work for you for A, B, and C reason. This is my dream job. And if you have any other questions that I haven't answered, I'd be happy to answer those now or via email. And I really look forward to working with you. Okay, you kind of close it out. It's just a sales technique. And then the piece that most students forget is a follow-up. After your interview, you need to send thank you emails. And you can also, on top of that, send a handwritten card. But get that email out the same day you interview, because you don't want them comparing you to the other candidates who did interview because you waited 3 days. So send your thank you note. And when you send that thank you email, be sure that you reference something specific in the interview, like a project they're working on or a new initiative they have. The generic, I was really nice to meet you, I look forward to working with you, isn't as special, okay? So those are the basics of what's going to happen in an interview. It might happen if you are doing this in several stages, you're going to go through this multiple times. That's fine. It's no problem. I'm going to pause this now, and we're going to pick up with Q&A, the top 10 questions in the next video.